Okay, so we have another combat mission, Shock Force NATO module mission. This one is called Ghost Towns, and I have to clear an enemy town and also ensure that the area is clear of ATGMs. Starting off, I have a recon platoon, motorized recon platoon, and a light armored recon platoon. The motor platoon is equipped with Wolf Jeeps, and the light armored platoon is equipped with Fenix, which are sort of like Strikers. Basically an armored truck with wheels. Looking over the AO here, these are areas adjacent to the main town that I'm being tasked with capturing. And here's the road leading up into the town. And as we can see here, the town has a lot of overwatch positions, a lot of high-rise buildings, and those are going to be prime grounds for ATGMs. So the opening phase of this operation will consist of me getting my recon elements into an overwatch position and then calling in fire missions on suspected enemy positions. Suspected positions where they could have ATGMs positioned. You see here, I'm on the reverse slope of the AO. I'm going to be skylining here in a second. And there's a little ridge next to a little irrigation trench. I'm going to position my vehicles on there. And try to get eyes on the roads leading to the town, isolate any enemy forces that are moving with fires from PZHs and mortars. As of now, I have air support as well. I also have a AH-64 and that will come in handy for sure. The enemy in this scenario is similar to the ones from the previous one. The enemy is expected to be a mainly foot mobile force, Fedayeen, with heavy weapon support and ATGMs. Very elusive and dangerous enemy. So, right now, the forward observer that's been attached to the reconnaissance platoon is currently sighting in the PZHs. It's going to call in some fire missions on suspected locations of enemy positions. These PZHs are extremely accurate and very deadly.
Feueranforderung kommen.
So I just picked two prominent high-rise buildings in the center of the town, and I do point fire missions, just enough ordnance to level the buildings. And as I'm doing that, I notice that there's some enemy forces running across the open fields on the right flank. And unfortunately, since I already ordered those fire missions in, I'm not going to be able to use the PCHs on them.
Roger, a route to attack position.
So instead I'm going to call in the Apaches. And you can see here that the Fenix are firing at the enemy forces that are maneuvering. The command Fennec, the C2 Fennec, has a 40mm grenade system, and the other one has an MG3. The MG3 isn't accurate at ranges beyond 400 or 500 meters, but the 40mm grenade system on there is quite accurate. It's comparable to the Mark 19. right now. I'm just trying to get eyes on the area where I'm calling in the close air support, sort of estimate the effect that I'm having. And as I'm doing that, I notice that there is an enemy technical driving by in that same vicinity with the ZU on the back, ZU-23, which is a heavy anti-aircraft autocannon.
Feuer Anforderung gefangen. Ende.
It could really mess up my forces there on the hill, and represents a great threat.
Abgefeuert. Kommen. Abgefeuert. Ende.
ZU is known and feared for its high rate of fire and also its high explosive ability.
Angefeuert, kommen!
Abgefeuert. Ende.
Achtung, aufschlagen, kommen!
Strangely,
Aufschlagen, Ende!
NATO module really doesn't model
Wirkungsschießen. Kommen.
Aufschlagen, kommen!
the effect of such weaponry on Blue Fort Cass.
Verstanden. Wirkungsschießen.
You'd expect
Ende.
that
Wirkungsschießen.
you would
Kommen.
at least have the ability to delay
An attack
and
position.
in reality
Rest of target.
probably
Verstanden.
damage
Wirkungsschießen. Ende.
low-flying aircraft like a Apache.
Ready
But
to engage.
that's not modeled at all in the game, from what I've seen.
Roger. Cleared hot.
Now we're seeing the first effect on the enemy positions, and the Apache knocked out the
Attack
ZU
position. Rest of target.
straight to with autocannon fire.
Feuerauftrag beendet. Ende. Ready to
Just
engage.
there you can see my howitzers bombarding the town. Apache's going to come in for another run. Engage infantry in the open.
At attack position. Request to target. Ready to engage. Roger. Cleared hot. At attack position. Request to target.
Right now, I'm continuing
Ready
to
to
sort of
engage.
try to sight in these positions where the ATs
Roger.
be.
Cleared hot.
I've noticed that there's an especially large building far to the rear of the town that I'm supposed to be securing, sort of on the suburbs, and that would be an ideal position for ATGM, so I'm going to go ahead and suppress that.
Aggressing on target.
Also, when I was switching through the guns there, I noticed that the first section of PZHs are very low on ammunition. So this is probably going to be the last fire mission from them for this engagement. It's a risk to,
Feueranforderung. Kommen.
to do preparatory bombardments like this, because you never know what you're going to really be up against, during the mission. For instance, I would very rarely do something like this if I knew that I was going to get engaged by enemy forces that posed a direct and immediate threat to my own forces, such as enemy armored units or mechanized units. I'd more likely want to hold on to that artillery and then use it to directly interdict heavy forces. But in this scenario, the heaviest thing the enemy has are these ZUs. Although the ZU-23s are a major threat, they're not the sort of immediate threat and decisive threat that the main battle taking pose say. And I also know that within 10 minutes of the mission start, I'm going to have 2 sections of 120mm mortars. They haven't arrived yet, but they will, or at least according to the briefing. Once the main body of the battalion arrives, I get the mortars, and that will, you know, be fine for making up for what howitzers I no longer have available. Right now I'm just scoping out the route leading to the right side urban centers.
Angefeuert, kommen! Abgefeuert, Ende.
Just a quick overview shows that there's a number of Overwatch positions where the enemy could be. They could ambush me when I try to cross. And although this right area here on the right side, although it's not part of my official objective, I'm going to secure it in order to attack the main town. Because otherwise I'm going to take oblique fire.
Roger.
And,
Route to attack position.
who knows what could be in the town. There could be ATGMs in there. There could be recoilless guns. There could be heavy machine gun positions. I just, I don't know what is in this area here. So I've decided that I'm going to secure it with at least 1 platoon. Just continuing here to do some preparatory bombardments. It's quite severe. Oh, and I guess I should make a note on why I'm leveling the buildings like this. It said in the briefing, I probably should have mentioned this before, it said in the briefing that the civilians were pretty much, you know, gone from this area, and that these are ghost towns, which is where the mission gets its name from. The ROE has changed to reflect that, so we're now able to destroy civilian structures, and I can be a lot more flexible with using fire support. Well, in the previous mission, my hands were sort of tied. That's why I'm calling in these cast requests without positive identification of targets. I'm just sending them. I'm just sending the Apaches into this wide area and saying attack everything here, because everything that's there is hostile. Okay, so what just happened is part of the battalion, the main body of the battalion, just showed up. I guess what I'm doing here is I'm just destroying an enemy OP, or at least I suspect it to be an OP, along the road.
Achtung, Aufschlag, kommen!
Then I start issuing new orders to the main body here. So right now we just have a platoon of panzers and a platoon
Ready to engage.
Split the tanks into 2 sections. We're going to have 1 section accompany the Grenadiers as they secure the right flank, and I'm going to have the other section provide overwatch where the current recon company is.
At attack position, ingress to target.
Now, what may happen when I go up on the ridge of the tanks is that any ATGMs that are sighted in there will probably open fire. They have probably been holding their fire up until now.
Feuerauftrag beendet. Ende.
I suspect that when they skyline, they'll open fire. So, it's like in the previous mission, I'm trying to entice the enemy to attack me. This way I can suppress the ATGM from a safe distance. Because you don't want to get attacked from the side or in close range by an ATGM. That's basically that sentence. can see in the distance here, the howitzers are landing on the town that I'm being ordered to secure. And there's also, directly ahead of where we're looking, there's also some smoke clouds from the Apache, which is continuing to attack the right flank urban center.
Attack position, request to target.
Here, what I'm doing is I'm just slowly creeping up. And now what I'm doing, this is pretty important to do.
Roger. Clear.
When you suspect that there might be an enemy force in front of you, rather than waiting for them to attack you first, take a preparatory action and just attack all buildings with the HE fires. So right now I'm just going to use mortars and I'm just going to suppress all these buildings. Because I know that there's an ambush there. Because there's a road, there's an MSR actually, leading on the right flank here. And I know that they don't want me to use the MSR. So they're probably going to have ambush forces in these buildings here. It's right next to the MSR. So what I'm doing now is I'm just laying into these buildings. Just suppressing them with the mortars and autocannons. And once they're effectively suppressed, I'm going to dismount the infantry and we're going to assault. So I'm literally just shooting HE rounds into every building that's facing me. Every building that could potentially attack my dismounts. I'm especially wary about the two-story buildings that are here. If there was an RPG team in there, they could definitely cause some damage. Okay, so now I'm tasking my forces to go assault. We're going to have 3 sections of infantry move up in a relatively compact column. This way, they can provide as much fire as possible if engaged. They're going to be using tactical bounds. And still, I'm suppressing because I don't really feel confident about, I learned some lessons from the first mission, and I learned that not to trust any building, basically. That all these buildings are potential ambush positions. It's a sort of paranoid way of conducting war, but it's what you have to do when the enemy is not uniformed and they hide. They hide until you get really close and then they fire. So while that's going on, we turn back to the center here. My other section of tanks are now in Overwatch. They have a good line of sight on the roads leading into the town. They have good line of sight on the buildings, the rooftops, so if any of those rooftops have the ETGMs, they'll be able to respond. So, I no longer need the recon platoons here to provide Overwatch. So I'm going to go ahead and detach them. They're going to head on the left flank. They're going to go scout out a potential approach to the enemy town. Because I don't want to approach on the right flank because of all those buildings there and all the open grounds. So I'm going to approach on the left flank. But in my way on the left flank is another little urban center on the far left of the screen. That has to be secured before I can move the rest of the battalion through there. So we're making pretty silent and unremarkable progress here on the right. I haven't been fired upon. I haven't spotted any contacts. I suspect that there are at least a few dead Fedayeen in these buildings. They've entered the outskirts of the town. and the first fire team managed to get inside that building. What I'm doing here is I'm going to move this martyr a little bit to the right. This way I can get fires onto these buildings on the right fringe of the compounds. Basically, you need to position your AFVs in such a way that they can fire on every building that can possibly fire on your infantry. Anything else, and you're taking a risk. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use these guys on the I'm going to use my recon platoons here to scout out the left flank approach before the rest of the battalion moves into that area. And this is for purposes of ensuring security. It's also for purposes of suppressing any enemy weapon systems that might be there, and otherwise engage by forces that are passing through that area. So I managed to get the entire dismount platoon into the urban center here on the right. But see, what I'm doing here is I was sighting in a smoke screen because I can't suppress the buildings on the right side of the compounds without endangering my vehicles, because I'd have to roll them into the town. Or I shouldn't say town, but I have to roll them into the urban center. So what I'm about to do is I take a risk. Rather than making a smoke screen, because I didn't want the spotting rounds to hit my friendlies, and I didn't really look this far ahead. What I do is I just try to rush across this field and hope, take a gamble that there's no enemy forces in those buildings. And this was a mistake.
Feueranforderung kommen.
So as soon as I start taking fire, I immediately call in a little fire mission to just level that entire section of buildings right there. My guys are rushing out in the open. Unfortunately, 2 don't make it, 2 get hit. And now a firefight erupts. I'm trying to rush the other sections to support. In retrospect, what I probably should have done is I probably should have just took the risk and called in a smoke screen. Or what I could have done alternatively is I could have called in a smoke screen before I moved my dismounts up.
Feueranforderung empfangen. Ende.
Luckily, though, I am able to get a quick fire superiority, and there only did appear to be 1 enemy team there. So, with any luck, I should be able to perform buddy aid and stabilize those casualties before they die. Because this isn't a completely unstable situation. once those enemy teams are sort of pushed out of that right side there, they're not going to really pose any further threat.
Abgefeuert. Kommen.
Abgefeuert. Ende.
I can go outside again and get my guys back up. So now, two recon platoons are advancing into diamonds,
Aufschlagen. Ende.
moving towards
Wirkungsschießen. Kommen.
the left.
Verstanden. Wirkungsschießen. Ende.
Spotting rounds for the fire mission, which are going to level those buildings. Just landed. Landed about 100 meters away from my lead element, which is pretty damn close. Closer, it probably would have been a guaranteed wound and possibly a kill. I'm taking a risk here by my tanks in the field setting. I know that all the buildings in the foreground have been suppressed, and any enemies that were there are probably KIA. But the other buildings here, their status is unknown. Nevertheless, I'm advancing my tank because I want to take suppressive fire on that building. This way, the enemy infantry that is as we can see here, the PZH is just amazingly accurate. All those effect rounds are landing within 5 to 10 meters of the linear plot.
Beendet. Ende.
So what I notice here is that there's a little rise, a little ridge leading up to this town that I want to get eyes on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dismount the recon teams, and I'm going to run them up to the ridge, bottom of the ridge, and then have them slow crawl up onto the ridge. The reason for this is, if there's a large enemy force in the town, or a ZU, they will take massive casualties if I skyline with the vehicles at that range. So this is just caution, because what I'm really afraid of is a ZU in that town. Because if there's a ZU-23 in that town, and I skyline a bunch of motorized vehicles onto the ridge there, and the ZU has an aim point on them, it's just going to be massive death. I might lose the entire platoon in a matter of seconds. So, now that those buildings here have been leveled, I'm going to go ahead and get some overwatch. I'm going to go into one of these two-story buildings, try to get overwatch on the other buildings that are a mere 25 to 150 meters away. Once overwatch is established, my second priority is to stabilize the soldiers that have been hit in action. Wounded in action, rather. They're critical, and if I don't tend to them, it's likely that they'll perish. So security is number one. After security, it's all about preserving your force. So I'm just spreading out the motorized recon platoon, which is now dismounted. I'm spreading them out on the ridge. So far, there hasn't been any contact, which is always good. So I have one squad here tending to the wounded. I have another squad in a low level overwatch, and I have a third squad in a two-story building providing overwatch. So hopefully those casualties will be attended to. And of course, the overwatching squad, the two-story building, sees nothing because the enemy are cowed. They're just hiding, and they're just going to wait for me to move in, then they're going to fire on me. So that's the name of the game. So most of the recon platoon has now crawled onto the ridge here, and they're getting eyes on the town. Managed to stabilize one of the casualties, and I'm now going to be stabilizing the second casualty. Meanwhile, I'm sighting in the Overwatch squad. I'm sighting in all the buildings to see if they can provide effective cover fires. So what I'm doing now is I don't want to take the risk of that happening again, so I need to maneuver my vehicles so that they can fire upon the buildings that are ahead. The first order of business is to maneuver the section of tanks that are on the right flank into an overwatch position. In order to do that, I need to ensure that the buildings going down the center are secure, otherwise they'll get shot from the rear when they're trying to provide cover. And then what I'll do, once those buildings are secure, I will use bounding overwatch towards the center and then orient towards the right flank. Bounding overwatch is the best way to ensure survivability, especially in tanks. Tanks have a tendency to have target fixation and also low situational awareness when in close ranges. Right now I'm just firing some heat rounds into these buildings. Heat rounds are high explosive anti-tank. They were originally designed to kill BMPs and other sort of armored, light armored vehicles. But they also have a pretty effective secondary high explosive effect, which is useful against infantry. See, now what I'm doing is I'm bounding behind the tank that is in the front, and I'm setting the other tank onto its side flank. So what you do is you make successive bounds until you're in a position where you're online, basically. So the tank that just bounded is now going to provide a base of fire, while the first tank is going to maneuver to set on the left side of the second tank. This way you always have one element that is looking at the enemy and prepared to fire on it if the enemy responds. So now that I've established Overwatch using my infantry, now that the casualties are taken care of, and now that I'm sort of getting some high explosive fires into these suspected ambush positions, I can now advance the infantry up. As soon as this combat is secure, then I can finally begin to assault the main objective. also finally going to go ahead and dismount the command element for the first platoon. And I'll make the command post that two-story building that the other squads are now overwatching at.
Feueranforderung, kommen.
Command post or an observation post is often a good thing because it's a good position from which to call in fire support. So now back to the left flank, what we see is there's some sort of infantry contact next to a bush here. So just as a preventive measure, I'm going to call in a small fire mission onto it, probably 5 or 6 rounds HE. Airburst style, and as soon as that recon team begins to call in the fire mission, I notice that it's an ATGM team. So I noticed that there was one building that I could not suppress from the other positions. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a big risk, and I'm going to advance my mortar to a position to fire on the building. The mortar will probably get knocked out by an RPG. So I'm hoping that I'll catch the enemy by surprise, and I seemingly do. So now every building has been suppressed. If there is an enemy in one of those buildings, then they are hardcore, and congrats to them. So now I'm going to begin to finally clear the rest of the compounds. The sniper team, part of the command element, has spotted an enemy infantry team in the right flank urban center. I can't directly target it with mortars because I don't have a good observer there, but I am going to call in a linear anti-personnel fire mission that should stretch over and probably affect the enemy targets. So during this entire time, two more Panzer Grenadier platoons have arrived, and this constitutes the remaining body of the battalion. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use those two platoons. I'm going to send them to the left flank. They're going to be on the reverse slope, so they won't be detected. I'm going to use those two platoons to attack the main objective.
Roger, en route to attack position. Abgefeuert, kommen. Abgefeuert, Ende.
Why I just called in the Apache there was because I spotted some sort of contact in the vicinity over there. And it's just preventive, you know. I really don't want to lose any vehicles to ATGMs, and I has so much fire support that I can take that risk and, expend it.
Angefeuert. Kommen.
So the sniper team is
Abgefeuert.
engaging these footballs over here. Very ineffectively, I might add. Although they are pinning them down, which is a plus. Once they're pinned, I can take them out with artillery.
Achtung, Aufschlag, kommen. Aufschlag, Ende.
So the recon company here
Wirkungsschießen, kommen.
is calling in
Abgefeuert.
fires on
Kommen.
that ATGM on the left.
Angefeuert. Ende.
Verstanden, Wirkungsschießen, Ende.
First spotting round, they're now landing. And I see now that it's an
Achtung,
SPG-9.
Aufschlag. Aufschlag.
An
Ende.
SPG-9 isn't as big as a threat as, say, a Sager missile or, one of the more modern missile systems. But it does have a pretty high rate of fire, and it's deadly in short ranges.
Abgefeuert,
So if I were to roll over that hill, and I didn't do my little foot recon that I did,
Attack position,
I probably would have taken casualties.
Ready to
Achtung,
engage.
Aufschlag. Kommen.
Aufschlag, Ende. Roger, cleared hot.
Wirkungsschießen. Kommen. Verstanden. Wirkungsschießen. Ende.
Attack position, aggressive target. Ready to engage. Roger, cleared hot.
So now that ATGM is neutralized, I can move up the Phoenix, use their optics to get a little bit better overwatch. And if I find that there's no more contacts in that town, I'm going to go ahead and prosecute an assault on that town with those platoons.
Ready to engage. Roger, cleared hot. Egressing from target. Feuerauftrag beendet. Ende.
So this is the assembly area for the main attack on the left. What I'm doing now is I'm just getting those two platoons into some good formations. They're going to be advancing on line in sort of a company-sized line. They're just going to attack in a mechanized wave towards the town. So now that the Phoenix are in sufficient overwatch, I'm going to go ahead and remount the motor recon platoon.
Feueranforderung empfangen. Ende.
Angefeuert. Kommen.
Abgefeuert. Ende.
And now that the compound on the right has been secured, I'm going to go ahead and remount this platoon. I am going to leave the platoon snipers in Overwatch, and I'm going to leave
Aufschlag,
the 4
kommen.
observers there as well.
5 for cast. Aufschlag. Ende.
This way I have eyes on the approaches, and I can call in fire support.
Roger, a route to attack position.
So I noticed that there's a lot of enemy activity in the main town.
Abgefeuert. Ende.
So there hasn't been any real solid contact reports, but there is a great deal of activity. Accordingly, I'm going to call in a cash request in that general vicinity. Just going to let the Apache gunner go crazy and just fire at will. Basically shoot at anything that's moving.
Achtung, Aufschlag, kommen!
Aufschlag. Ende.
Wirkungsschießen,
I'm also preparing
kommen!
here for an assault on the right flank.
Verstanden, Wirkungsschießen, Ende.
The right flank assault is going to be comprised by the 1st Panzer Grenadier Platoon and the section of Panzers with the company support elements. The left side offensive is going to be comprised of the 2 recon platoons and 2 Panzer Grenadier platoons, plus a single overwatching tank, which will be positioned on the ridge.
Feueranforderungen kommen!
At attack position, egress the target.
So I noticed some more infantry contacts in the town.
Ready to engage.
Just going to call in an area fire mission.
Roger. Cleared hot.
Light saturation.
At attack position, egress the target. Ready to engage. Roger. Cleared hot. At attack position, egress the target. Feuerauftrag beendet. Ende. Ready to engage. Roger. Cleared hot. Feueranforderung empfangen. Ende. At attack position, egress the target. Ready to engage.
Angefeuert, kommen!
Roger. Cleared hot. Abgefeuert. Ende.